Hello, everyone, and welcome to another discussion by the Church Web People. My name is David, and we're joined today by Paul Prince, who is going to be presenting or I guess facilitating a discussion about various options for church knowledge bases. I think this is a super relevant topic because a lot of churches have a lot of information that they're trying to retain and reuse, and kind of to give some normality to their church services and their various operations. And if you don't have a system to store that, I think it's a kind of a dangerous place to be at. So without further ado, Paul, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the intro. We are talking about knowledge bases today, and the topic of the conversation is where's your church's knowledge base? And so a little bit about myself. I'm Paul Prince. There's a styling picture of me. My Twitter handle's up there too. I'm currently based in Paris. I run a software company called FreshFind. We do nonprofit and church member management. I'm also have an MDiv from Bethel Theological Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I've worked at a number of churches here and there along the way. Various roles, from pastoral roles to volunteers to interns to a whole bunch of other things. So that's me, and we'll just kind of dive in here quick. I've got maybe 2 or 3 minutes in the form of an introduction, and then I got some just ideas for questions to kind of guide conversation, but really I want us to kind of share our experiences, our thoughts, things we'd love to try, that kind of a thing. I think between all of us, this could be a really neat conversation. So on a really high level, it takes a time to dial in the best ways to get things done around and for your church. That could be everything from where do you buy communion wafers, how do you get bulletins printed, where do you order supplies for certain things, what weird things have to happen when throughout the year. So if it's things like gutter cleaning or certain checks or flushing of certain lines in the church to, if you had a rodent or an infestation problem in the past, how did you deal with it? Who did you call? What advice did they have you going forward? These are all things that we'd really rather not forget. And so that begs the question, is it all written down, and does anyone else know where to find it? And that's really where the crux of this knowledge base idea comes in. So a knowledge base can serve as a central point of contact for critical information about what, where, and why of the things your church does. And we're now to the conversation portion. I thought it would be kind of interesting just to start here with, a conversation about what tools people are currently using, and I just kind of want to open it up at this point.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. For those of you who haven't watched our previous episodes, I'm Pastor Dale at St. James Lutheran Church in West St. Paul, Minnesota. We actually, it's funny because this is a really great conversation for us because we have stuff all over the place. Some stuff is, in print on a shelf somewhere, and our secretary knows where to find most of it, and our senior pastor knows where to find some of it, and I know who to ask to find it because I don't know where pretty much any of it is. In the past, the church I was at before this, I spent about a year putting everything into Google Drive, as much as I could find, setting up permissions and things like that. And it kind of worked out because it took me about a year to get it all together, and then just as I was finishing it up, I took a call to come here, and I was not expecting that. When I started it, I had no plans to leave, and but then here I am, and I'm not there anymore, but I already had all that stuff together, and we had step-by-step instructions on how to do different things, and passwords and shared documents and all that kind of stuff. Pretty much everything that they needed that I had that they could possibly that I could provide for them. And so one thing that I definitely want to emphasize with this is that you need to work ahead on it and not wait until the last minute
So you mentioned that it was kind of in a couple different places, and you were trying to consolidate it in Google Drive. Was that something that was kind of that your other staff and volunteers were on board with and had access to, or was it more purely a staff tool? Because I know with Google Drive, a lot of times it's it's attached to a Google Apps account, and it's kind of like a shared resource there, or
Yeah, we had the Google Apps account, and I mean we had a staff, well, at least a paid staff of 2, plus a handful of volunteers, and so I created it. I was originally using it for my use because I migrated to it from Evernote because it had better sharing capabilities and better formatting, and so then I wanted to share some stuff. We were using Dropbox for things like collaborating on putting services together and stuff like that, the PowerPoints and whatnot. But Dropbox has a lot more limitations as far as space goes in Google Drive. As long as you use Google Docs and things like that for most of your stuff, you don't have a lot of video in that. I mean, space-wise, you're a lot better. You can collaborate in real time on documents and stuff like that. And I wanted to make that available to them. I mean, I think part of it was trying to teach them how to do it so that they could make use of it besides just me.
Yeah. And what are you using now at the church in West St. Paul?
We've got some stuff as hard copy. We've got, I think the primary source is Microsoft SharePoint, which is part of the Office 365. Yeah. That's our kind of main document, but sharing. But the problem is it's not as easy to share outside of the organization, like with volunteers and stuff like that. It's really designed more. I mean, I think there's a way to do it, but I haven't figured it out. It's really, you kind of have a set number of users, whereas with something like Dropbox or Google Drive, it's a lot easier. It's really kind of built right into it, and it's a lot more cross-platform. There's Office 365 is getting better. The new version of Office on the Mac handles it a lot better than it did, but it still doesn't work as well as it does in Windows. And then you lose even more functionality on a mobile platform. And we've got a few people here that primarily use an iPad, and so for them it works, but just it's just not quite as easy. In Windows, it's almost like a Dropbox on steroids. There's a lot more collaborative capability and stuff, but so it definitely, I'd like to move to Google Drive, but that has its drawbacks too. So I've been keeping track of certain things, like I've been here for just over a year, and so when I came, as I've learned things, I've been jotting them down because I know that eventually we're going to have new staff and things in the years to come, and so I've started, just as I learn, need to know this, need to know that, and different traditions and all kinds of stuff. I've been jotting it down so that when somebody new comes in, I can go, here, let me explain all these bullet points to you or something. So,
nice. Does anybody else have anything they want to share about?
This is Brad Wade. I'm an elder and the music director at Story Community Church in Queens, in New York City. I'm very interested in this topic because our church currently really has nothing, no formal plan. All this information is only stored inside of various people's heads, and you just sort of have to know which person to talk to get the information, to get the answer from the question, and so. Yeah, and that's been, and definitely that can prove to be a pain point and isn't a good workflow. I'm a website developer also, and at work we've been asking the same question. And at work we've just decided on using Confluence, which is a professional wiki type of solution. As a place that we're going to amass our documentation and our workflow practices, and so that's what we've decided. So in both of my worlds, in my professional world and church life, I've been hit with this, and so it's all swirling around in my mind. But in terms of with the church, I think user adoption is like the key to making this happen and making this work and making it successful. And then so that's what I'm most curious about. Or one thing is just like what's going to be most accessible that people will buy into and really contribute to and use and go to again to find the answers they need.
Great. Do you have any additional thoughts, David, on kind of from your experience, what you have used in the past or are using?
Sure. Well, so my background, for anyone who doesn't know, is I work for Enjoy Creativity. We're a nonprofit that helps churches and ministries get set up with various services online. And this isn't really a question that I've had in the past. I think I can relate from a business and a nonprofit, having to organize, the way that things are done, and I've tended to do that on Google Drive as well, just as a central repository for jotting down notes, things I need to bring up at the next board meeting, just a general place to keep things to show people later. So I'm super interested in this topic because I think that there are a lot of churches that we've seen that don't really have anything like this. It is all word of mouth. But like I said, I don't really have any direct experience using it with a church directly.
Yeah, in my experience, it's pretty much been Word documents that people have written up. Normally it's around a particular function or task, so it'll be, this is the information about the AV equipment, or this is the information about everything in the kitchen. So it's got model numbers, service numbers, when things were built and fixed, and it tended to be things that were either had a large volunteer turnover, so they want to make sure that it was documented well, or there were things that had large capital investment. And so at the time of the investment, you could tell that somebody sat down and wrote out, the things they thought would have been important. And then those files, wherever they ended up, it was pretty hit or miss. I guess the other area would have been policy stuff. So there were things around the requirements for working with children, or for handling money, or for whatever those things were, and then those were pretty clearly laid out. These are the steps. You need to have a background check, and you get that through this organization, and this is the type of background check you need, and who you talk to, and all those sorts of things. So kind of similar to what I'm hearing from everybody except Bradley, who apparently they have nothing written down. And so it's interesting because even again in my professional world, the non-church side, the non-ministry side of what I do, it's been a conversation that actually happened with some other software founders. Even in the last week, we were having this conversation. And, I have a friend who works at Trello, and they, surprise, surprise, somehow used Trello as their knowledge base, which I don't quite get how that works. It's like a giant to-do board thing, but they've shoehorned it in there somehow, and it's working for them. Otherwise, it's pretty consistent across the board. People are using a lot of Google Drive in particular, and Dropbox, full of documents basically that have information on them. So at this point, let's go to the next question, and this is something that I think could be interesting. It also could be something we talk about for like a minute and move on. But should there be one point or many points that this data is being stored? And kind of what I mean by that, like, are we looking for the kind of the holy grail place to store all this information, or does it make sense to actually have things kind of piecemealed in a few separate spots based on the nature of the information or who needs to have access to it?
Well, something like like Google Drive or something like that, where you can give someone access to an entire folder, or even have some folders public, or something like that. There's a definite advantage to that. It's nice to have everything all in one spot. Another option would be to have it on like a private section of the church website. Although where you have, you need to make it easy to have attachments and things like that, and see if you've got some like PDF user manual or something like that, that you could attach. But at that point, Google Drive or Dropbox, something like that, would probably be easier. So there's going to be certain things that that you can't store electronically, and but even there, you could have a document that says, you can find these manuals in these places, or something like that. I think the most important thing is that if you're looking for it, you need to be able to know where to find it, and so searchable is huge. Beyond that, you could, if you wanted for some reason to have, I've got some stuff in Dropbox and some stuff in Google Drive and or whatever else, as long as you can go to one place and search for it all, like at least the average staff member could go on their computer and do a search somewhere, like search their hard drive and find everything there. That's an advantage over with something like Dropbox, where you can search your whole hard drive for it. Whereas with Google Drive, if you're using Google Docs, you can't search your hard drive for Google Docs, because even if you use the Google Drive app, really the Google Docs that you have are just web links to open it up, and you actually have to go to Google Drive to actually read it.
Yeah, I was thinking too about when we were first discussing this on Slack, one use case that Pastor Dale had mentioned about something you want to store that you'd still want to keep really private would be like passwords and things like that. And I don't know about a church. I mean, maybe a more technical church would benefit from a tool like LastPass or something where you're able to generate and store credentials for various websites. A great thing about that is you can also do things like notes, secure notes, and company or church credit cards, or bank account information, things like that. Generally, things that you want to keep very private and secure, two-factor authentication, all that stuff. But you still want to share with people. You are able to share those with anyone else that you want who has a LastPass account, which could be pretty handy for this.
Yeah, and that's, I think when I was looking at the, one point or many points, I think what you just mentioned, David, there are actually sensitive pieces of information that should be shareable and should be accessible to more than just one person. And so you can think on the finances side, you probably have a couple different individuals in the organization that are, that should, from have access to the bank account for the church, the bank accounts, whatever that looks like. So you've got the finance committee, and then you've got depending on how you're structured, you have a board of elders, or you have some governance body where it would make sense that somebody on that group would be able to verify that, yes, the office is telling us that there's $9,000 in the checking account for the church. Let's check. Yep, there's $9,000 in the checking account. Like, the books match. Fantastic. And so there are certain things like that where, you shouldn't be publishing that information in a wiki in a file shared on Dropbox or Google Drive. You definitely shouldn't be putting it on your website, even if it's in a protected page, because that's just horrifying to me as a guy who works on the internet. Yeah, and so I think tools like LastPass and some of those others that allow for credential sharing, and I think, was it 1Password or LastPass that came out with a Teams piece just in the last 6 months that makes it really easy to share. There's one of the two, I can't remember which right now.
I know LastPass has had team sharing for some time, several years at least.
Yeah, I think it was a change in the pricing model for it, which made it more approachable for a lot of organizations. And so it's just kind of a neat way that you can grant and then later revoke access to certain credentials, which is another thing that as a membership platform, so we're a church database, is something that we run into a lot, where you've got, well, this elder is no longer around and they had an account, how do we remove that? And so that's another thing with some of the more sensitive information we need to think about. But otherwise, I think that it kind of seems like having it be searchable, which was Dale's kind of key takeaway there, I think is critical. So if we go back to the main points of conversation, I don't know if having a conversation about what has and hasn't worked, at this point that's feeling a little redundant to me. So what I'd like to maybe exchange this question for is, I tried to slide with my finger and I hit it wrong. Exchange it for a question just about, what are things that you've seen that are intriguing to you? And the church component, for Brad with the work using that platform, there's a cost and an expense there that my hunch is most churches would not be willing to front the cost for. And so there's a component of that, wanting to have something that's cheap or free to use and maintain. But what are things you guys have seen that are interesting or that you just have heard about?
I was kind of wondering if someone was going to suggest that Slack might be used as a place to retain information about the way that things are done. Considering if you had a pro account and everything was kept forever, it would be searchable and collaborative, and you can upload documents and things like that, sort of. But I don't know if we need to discuss that.
Permissions with that, though.
You could have private groups that you share with people.
Yeah. Yeah, but the nice thing about something like Google Drive is that you can adjust permissions per person.
Right.
You can have a whole folder, that certain people can access, but then you can also, one of the disadvantages, though, I should mention with Google Drive, is when I originally set it up, I was using it because I was already using it personally. It was under my personal account. Then I wanted to move a bunch of stuff over to the church's Google Apps account before I left, and that was impossible. You can actually, what I ended up having to do is create a new Gmail address, a different Google account for the pastor there, and move, because you can move things from private account or private Google Drive to private Google Drive, but you can't transfer ownership from private to an apps account, which was really annoying.
Yeah, that's interesting. Seems like a glaring oversight.
Yeah. I mean, it was really ridiculous. So, because I just wanted to transfer everything to the pastor with that church, and I couldn't do it. even though I had access to both accounts, I tried. There was stuff where I could, move. I could just copy files over, and stuff like that, because I had it all on my computer and I could manually move it that way. But I couldn't just transfer. Okay, this whole folder, change the ownership. I couldn't do it. One other thing to mention is with depending on your church management software, there for one, you've got a lot of times you got your financials that are built into that, and then all of your person directory kind of information. And I'm not sure that there's a sort of holy grail of church management software that also does a really nice job of file sharing. I haven't looked into it, but I don't remember seeing anything.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time in that space since that's functionally what FreshFind is. That's actually how we marketed ourselves for the first 5 years before broadening to nonprofit membership software. But yeah, the file sharing thing is really the rub. That would be the spot where you would see a lot of that fall apart, and trying to use that, your kind of central membership management database for that. I know in FreshFind we have a notes feature, which is a searchable tool that you can log notes and search through them, and they're by group. And so if you've got a group that's your elders or your governance board, they can keep all their notes. If you have one that's the youth group and they want to let the leaders of the youth group be able to keep notes and store those, you could do that. But then again, that's much more intimately tied to that platform than I think a lot of organizations would be comfortable with. Even as the guy who runs that company, I don't know that I'd be comfortable putting information beyond just like the membership piece into a tool like that. It seems like you'd be wetting yourself pretty closely. Which is one of the nice, I'd say that almost becomes kind of a perk for like a Dropbox type environment where if down the road you want to move that somewhere else, it's fairly simple to grab, if they're text documents, PDFs, Word documents, whatever, to be able to just pull those and put those somewhere else pretty quickly. But yeah, I'll jump in here as well, just based on a conversation that I had earlier this week. And I'll share a little bit about what we do with FreshFind. We have, so we do have a Dropbox account that we don't really use that much anymore. When I had a little bit larger of a team, we had a couple individuals that were not the most web savvy, but they loved Microsoft Office Suite, and so it was kind of an easy way to be able to share documents. One of the things I ran into really quickly was the rapid proliferation of documents, where I'd look one day and we'd have a meeting and they'd be like, oh, well, no, I put that in Dropbox. And I was like, well, here's the file called like marketing strategy or whatever, and be like, it's not in the file. They're like, oh no, I made a file in this other folder over here that like had some weird name that, and so like that can be a challenge when it's that flexible of a platform and a strategy. The opposite of that would be something more like a structured wiki or a more structured documentation platform. There's a couple tools out there you can use with like Markdown. If people are familiar with Markdown, it's kind of it's a weird programming thing. I see the two guys that also do kind of engineering stuff nodding their heads like, yeah, I know Markdown. I honestly, it's pretty simple, but outside of the engineering technical world, I don't know a lot of people that are familiar with Markdown. But Brad looks like he's wanting to jump in here. So.
Oh, well, just keying off of you said of actual wiki solutions, because that was the one there is Media Wiki, which is the same wiki platform that like Wikipedia runs on, and that's an open source, application. So I was curious about wondering how user friendly that is to use. If you can get that just installed and set up somewhere, one place, and if that was a viable solution to use.
Yeah. Does anybody have? I have a little bit of experience with MediaWiki. Does anybody else have experience with either Wikipedia itself as contributing or managing, or on other wikis?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly which one or what the name is, but when I first moved here to Illinois, there was a local town wiki that had information about here are all the coffee shops that have free Wi-Fi and the relative speeds, and here's a list of garbage collection companies. Here's who to go to for this service and things like that. And I found it extremely helpful to move into a town that has some of that infrastructure in place, and then to be able to contribute. I called up a couple of the garbage companies that were on the list. I went to a couple of coffee shops and contributed, and I felt like it was really helpful. As someone new coming to the area. So I think a wiki could make a lot of sense for those sorts of public shared knowledge in that way.
On a side note, that would be a great idea for a local church to set up something like that, but then encourage community involvement to build it and stuff like that. I think it'd be a great way to contribute to the community.
So you mean for a church to set up the community wiki for their community to?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good idea.
That is a neat idea.
I think just one issue on the Media Wiki that I don't think there's any way to set any user level privileges. I think if I'm correct, the whole wiki is available to everybody, and there, you can't have any sort of user groups where certain information is only available to certain user types or anything. So I think that can only be used for information that you just want available to the whole group that's using the wiki. So as far as I understand, anyway.
I actually don't know if that's correct.
Well, I hope it's not. So
I'm pretty sure. And most of us, our experience with wikis is pretty much relegated to, Wikipedia and searching and stumbling across some wiki that has something that we need on it. So we're only finding the public aspects of it. But I'm pretty positive that you can set the permissions to. They have groups in MediaWiki that you can assign users to. I'm pretty positive that you're allowed to relegate pages of the wiki to a particular group. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm 99% sure that works. So don't completely hold me to it. But again, the other aspect of that is that this would be something that would be more public. And with that, there are pluses and minuses involved in using a wiki. My actually biggest personal drawback to the wiki is it's a little bit of a usability nightmare. It is not very approachable. It's convenient to pull information out of, and it's very searchable. But in my experience, that's been where, oh no, my browser is doing something weird. Can you guys still?
Yeah, I can still hear and see you.
Awesome. In my experience, it's been, I set one up once hoping that we could use it for kind of like a documentation platform for work. That would have been something that would be searchable. And I had hopes that if it went well, it would be something that we could really easily roll out and use with the church I was working at the time. And it ended up just not, it was almost too configurable and too just, I don't know. It just didn't seem to be where it would have needed to be to have, you know, the volunteers and staff of a church where I would have felt comfortable saying, hey, yeah, this is a great platform, a great tool. Why don't you go ahead and jump on board and let's use it? And that, I think, is kind of leading into the next question here is, you know, the getting people on board. At the end of the day, like, no matter what platform you pick or combination of tools you pick, it only works if people can actually use it and get the information they need from it. And so my thought, and kind of the general thought from a conversation I had earlier this week, was, you know, anything that has kind of a WYSIWYG editor, so that includes, you know, Google Docs, it includes Microsoft Word, even depending on the type of information that you're keeping, even just a simple WordPress site for information that can be public could also potentially work if it's, you know, things like, where do we buy communion wafers? How often does, you know, when, you know, you've got Advent for churches that do the whole big Advent thing. When do you have to get certain orders in for things like candles? And, you know, where did we store the banners that go on the wall? And where did we put this, that, and the other thing? Oh man, my computer is freaking out.
Well, we can still hear you. It looks like your video might be frozen. Oh, it's moving again. Well, yeah. Well, we only have 2 more minutes left of the discussion anyway. But I'm sorry. What was the question that we were on?
How do you get people on board?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on your setup. I mean, around here, it would be a matter of having a staff meeting, maybe having you know, our tech support company, you know, talking to them and seeing what they support and what they don't support. You know, and just seeing, I think cross-platform is really huge unless everybody's using the same thing. But even then, you've got mobile devices that probably are something different. So if you want to be able to access it, you need to be able to do that too. But then, you know, it's just a matter of talking to the people that actually need it and, you know, finding out what's going to work best for everybody. But yeah, usability is huge.
Yeah, it seems like the sort of thing where you would have to cater to the least common denominator, right? If you know, the pastor currently has, you know, 80% of all the information, and they're not going to be willing to set up or to contribute to the particular way that you want to do it, you know, what can you do short of like having someone work with them, you know, whether you or the secretary or someone work with them to actually transfer what they know into something that people can contribute to. But even then, how will you keep it up to date over time if they're not kind of, you know, bought into it, you know? I don't know. I guess ultimately you have to, whomever has the most time or the most initiative to get it done has to try something, and in a way it's kind of like a website project. You know, it's easy for smaller churches or you know, churches that don't have websites currently to kind of get the motivation, you know, kind of the initiative to go and do it and to create the content for it and all of those things. But you know, it's generally for the good, and it's worth a try, right?
Yeah, and I think at that point you're at the point of how do you institute any change? You know, how do you get buy-in from the right people, and how do you get enough momentum and get people? How do you cast the vision for it? convince people of the need, and show them easy wins of alleviating pain points in doing things around the church. So once you've figured out hopefully the best approach to take.
Yeah, well, it looks like Paul might have just dropped out. Pastor Dale, do you have any last thoughts to share?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Cross-platform, searchable, secure. Able to change your security settings for various stuff, and and just super easy usability. There he is. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, great. Well, oh, he dropped off again. Well, I think that's probably all we have today. So I guess I'll go ahead and close this out. Maybe Paul will listen to this later, but thank you, Paul, for kind of facilitating this discussion today. I think it was really helpful, and hopefully people online in the future will benefit from this as well, watching us on YouTube. You can get more information about this. I'll post some notes as well about some of the services that we talked about, and follow-up questions over at churchwebpeople.com, where we can discuss and have more future discussions. I'll post any sort of follow-up announcements about future discussions and topics there as well. Brad, do you have anything to say? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you next month. Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Thanks, Paul.
Glad I made it in right at the end again.
Say bye, Paul.
Bye, everyone. See you next month.